This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I'm Kara Szymborski, your host for today, and I am joined by two definitely not well-behaved women who are definitely making history, Kait Lamphere
Hello.
and Kate Scotchless.
Hello.
So we are delighted to be here today for a very special episode of I Read Comic Books, which is it is March, which in America is Women's History Month, apparently. And we thought, what a great excuse for us to get to talk about some of the comics by lady creators that we know and love, or might want to bring up to everyone's attention, or comics that we might enjoy. And we're just going to do like a little smorgasbord of different things that we all find very interesting and riveting, and love this excuse to talk about some of the things that we love to an audience that we love. So to start things off, Kait Lamphere, what did you think about when preparing for this episode? When we said Women's History Month episode, what was your first thought?
So my first thought was, maybe I haven't read enough comics by women, which is ludicrous. First of all,
I know you're reading history. That is false.
I went to the library, like you do, like I do, and I was like, I'm going to pick up a bunch of comics by women, and I grabbed some great comics, and I have only read half of them. So the fact that I have read half of them in prep for today is already a number of comics. But then as I was going back in the history of all the comics that I have read, I was like, I've read a lot of comics by women. So I am well prepared.
How about you, Kate Scotchless? What were you thinking of when we said, let's make a lady episode about lady things?
It didn't even occur to me to go back and look at my total reading history of women, because you wouldn't do that for men. Come on. What men comics have I read about men and by men? Let's see. No, that's so the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the OG Raina Telgemeier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did some reading and refreshing of Raina, who is the best. And then I also have just put together some thoughts on the latest comics lady that I've been reading, Emily Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
I just read A Guest in the House because of our IRCB Goodreads reading challenge. This was one of the books that was added to the list by Patreon supporter CK, and I really liked it, and I was really into it. It's very good.
Nice.
But how about you, Kara?
I immediately sorted my brain into little categories of wait, are we going to talk about lady creators? Are we talking about lady heroes? Are we talking about the history of women in comic books? Because I don't know if y'all have noticed, but we're trying a shorter episode format than previously. So I'm like, how are we going to fit the entirety of women in comics into 45 minutes of recording? It can't be done. So I thought, all right, that's too much pressure, first of all. And second of all, let's just pick some fun things to talk about. So I was thinking about, my first thought was, who are the lady creators that had the most impact on me, or are the comic book creators where I'm just like, oh man, she gets it. I read her stuff and I wanted to keep reading comics. And so I've picked one lady from 3 different buckets of the comics around the world. So I've got my lady creator for Western style superhero comics, which is Gail Simone for me, because when I was a teenager and getting into comic books, I was reading it was the mid 2000s. Jeff Johns was writing Teen Titans and all the event things. So that's kind of the era of DC that I'm talking about. And Gail Simone was writing Birds of Prey, which is a comic book about all the B and C list ladies in Gotham in kind of the Batverse adjacent stuff, going on all their own adventures and doing their own thing. And it's all female empowerment and friendship and sassy curse words and fun sidekicks. And it's just, her style of writing really spoke to me. And so she is one of the key reasons that I continued to read superhero comics on a monthly basis for a while. And then, of course, over in Japan, in the manga sphere, I've talked about her before. I'll talk about her again. But Naoko Takeuchi, who wrote Sailor Moon and had a just profound impact on my life in middle school and high school and beyond. And then I thought, well, I talk sometimes about French comics. Is there a French creator that I love and revere above all else? And the answer is yes. And her name is Margot Motin. And I follow her on Instagram, and she posts all these like really beautiful illustrations. I say beautiful, but she does like this very approachable, almost animated style of drawing. And I realized recently that I haven't talked about this in a while, but a few of her books are translated into English. So if you want a French, like memoir style comic book that is accessible and not too serious, and just the animation style, the illustration style is very animated and approachable, you should check out Plate Tectonics, because I think that was her first memoir piece that was translated into English. So those were kind of my immediate top three. I feel like I could talk about lady characters all day long, but I definitely thought I would start by doing the kind of high level overview. So I guess my question before we get into some like specific book recommendations for the two of you is: are there any comic creators who happen to be ladies who had an impact on you like those women had on me?
I mean, I feel like Raina Telgemeier is just like the reigning queen of women in comics and just people in comics in general. Like, she's the one responsible for convincing the comics industry that little girls will buy comics and read comics. Like, she's the reason there's a comics section in the kids section at Barnes and Noble. Like, it was just like such an industry shift with her. And obviously this is like in the time since we've been adults, but I also just love her books. And how many comics creators out there are known like mononymically by their first name and everyone knows who you're talking about? Like, when people say Raina, you know they're talking about Raina Telgemeier, like Beyonce, right? Like, and she's just become so like quintessential for a generation and just defining what children's comics are in this era. And this whole archetype of like the anxious kid really started with her in comic books, you know, and now it's like a whole genre. Like, before that, if you went and looked at comics for kids, it was like pretty exclusively like superhero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I adore her. In reviewing this stuff for her, I'm like, now I need to do a complete Raina reread, because it's just so feel good.
Yeah,
I love it, and her art is
it
incredible.
is so cute. I haven't revisited her books in a while because I'm like not a teenager currently, but like reading them when they first came out and everyone was talking about them, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I would have devoured when I was 12. Like, this is perfect.
Exactly.
No.
Well, 12 and younger. So it's really the 16 and under crowd, but like her main character in her memoir series, like Smiles, she's in like 4th grade. So these really are middle grade books for like the 4th through 8th grader in your life, right? Like, they're very much children's comics, not YA, not teen. The most senior ones are like the fiction ones, like drama about being in middle school and first crush and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, solidly middle school versus elementary. But yeah, so we're very outside of the realm of who these are aimed for. But like, she's friends with Scott McCloud, and it shows. Like, her use of the comics craft is just flawless.
Nice.
I feel like I tend to follow creators because I know that they're indie creators or something. So like Kaylin Smith jumps to mind, but I also am more aware of her work because she's like physically local to me, and I'm like, I got to get on those Kickstarters. But also some creators that are, I don't know, I don't think of them as being like big 2 creators still, but like Tilly Walden, for example, is a creator that I'll follow and make sure that I read everything that she does. Yeah.
Yep.
I think I want to do one more, and then I want some book recommendations. This came to mind because I've like all of mine are writer artists, and I want to shout out one other artist that had a big impact on me. Sophie Campbell's work on the Gem and the Hologram series from like 10 years ago. Super colorful, visually stunning. The reason that I've had various undercuts in my hairstyles over the last few years. So like that art really spoke to me. And while reading her Wikipedia, I realized that she has done some more recent work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which clearly I must look into. So Delighted by that. But Kait Lamphere, I'm really excited to hear about one of your book recommendations for like books about / by ladies.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that you got into the DC ladies comics in the mid 2000s. I didn't realize that there were specific like lady series in the mid 2000s. I've pretty much just been following current releases that have come out either since I've been reading comics in the last decade, or it's things that I've just like randomly picked up from the library and not noticed when they came out. So maybe that's just on me. But I've noticed that there are a lot of DC like OGNs, like standalone comics with that feature ladies, and they're kind of Elseworlds books. I think I don't really follow the DC canon.
The DC doesn't follow the DC canon, so I feel like you're fine.
Yeah, so I've been trying to read these standalone books as I see them come up. And I think the most recent one that I read was called Shadow of the Batgirl. This is by Sarah Kuhn, and then art by Nicole Gao. And this features on Cass, who's raised to be an assassin by her crime lord father, to the point where she wasn't taught to read or speak. And I don't know that she's like DC canon,
Cassandra
so it's not necessarily
Cain. Kait. Her name is Cassandra Cain, and she was the Batgirl. If you've seen like the Batgirl, where like her face is all covered in black, and it's kind of like sort of like a stitched together costume, like reminiscent of Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman. That's Cassandra Cain. She was Batgirl in between like Stephanie Brown being Batgirl and like them bringing back Barbara Gordon. There have been many Batgirls, like there have been many Robins. She is super canon. She is super badass. I am so pleased that there's an accessible entry point to her.
Yeah, it was great. See, I didn't even know that she was like part of the DC universe. I was like, look at this random character. I love her.
Yes.
So of course she's not going to stay a villain. This is a hero's book, you know.
She's an anti-hero like Jason Todd. Thank you. Continue.
Yeah. All right. Well, she goes and she lives at a library for a while to get away from her dad.
Perfect.
So I love her. She's great. She figures out how to read by herself because she's surrounded by books.
Oh, baby.
And I think that the way that I recognize this as being part of the DC universe, other than the logo on the front of the book, is that she kind of creates this found family. And one of those characters is Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
Delightful. She's like she's half Japanese. And then one of her new like found family friends mother figure is part Chinese. So there's a heavy Asian cultural approach to this book that I really appreciated, like in the food and in the aesthetic. And then also the writer has a nice like forward in the book about making it an own voices story because that's what she wanted to read. So that's what she wrote.
Well, I really want to read that because I can tell you just from my like surface memory reaching back in time 15 years that they definitely didn't like dive into any of that in the DC universe at the time. They were just like, yeah, she's Asian, it's fine. And it's like there's nothing actually ascribed to that. It was just this one's not white. Like, okay, sure.
Right.
What anything else? So that's really lovely.
I definitely recognized that influence in the book, and I thought that it was really nice. Yeah. And I also suggest that you read I read the front matter and the rear matter in all of the books because I feel like it's very informative. You get like the creators like insight and some of the like the design aspects of the book. Sometimes they'll talk about like collaboration between the writer and the artist and everything. And then there's like this little bit in the back of this book from another DC book called the Oracle Code about Barbara Gordon. And I'm going to have to read that one because that looks incredible. And I've noticed this thing where in all of these or half of these DC OGNs that I'm reading, Oracle is always a character, but it's always something a little bit different.
Okay.
Like I read a book recently where it wasn't even a person. And I don't understand. I'm gonna have to read this book about Oracle.
So all right. So Oracle is Barbara Gordon. Oracle is Barbara Gordon. Barbara Gordon is Oracle. But this was basically, unfortunately, during the Women's History Month episode, I have to talk about the Killing Joke. But in the Killing Joke, Joker shoots and abuses Barbara Gordon, paralyzing her from the waist down. And so she was Batgirl, spoilers. And because of this, injury that prevented her from like swinging off of rooftops, she like had this whole story arc where she was like mentally and physically rebuilding her body to the best of her ability. And she was, and Barbara Gordon was in like the Silver Age Batman comic books was like a librarian, and they had kind of kept that through line of her being a very like highly intelligent character. And so after in the comics she became paralyzed, they kind of leaned into her super smarts, and she like created this new alter ego persona for herself as Oracle. So she was kind of like the center of the spider's web for the DC universe, and like her function was very like anyone could call her and she would look up the intel. She was like the guy in the chair trope that you see in the superhero movies being like making fun of that. Like that's Oracle. And so when DC like rebooted their whole universe, and then they were like, and Barbara Gordon is back as Batgirl. I'm like, but the Oracle function. I mean, I'm delighted that she's not paralyzed through such a horrific assault, but Oracle was like a genuinely good character that helped with a lot of plot holes and a lot of stories. So it is super interesting that they like are recognizing that and bringing that in that role into these OGNs.
Yeah.
But
that's pretty consistent with what I read in Shadow of the Batgirl and that little bit of the Oracle code.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like she would appear either as herself or as like a digital avatar of like the mysterious Oracle, depending on how well she knew you and trusted you. So if she's appearing as like perhaps not human in some formats, I wonder if they're playing with that and it'll turn out that she's like the through line between these standalones. I guess you'll find out when you read it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read it. So. It looks great.
Delightful. Oh man, you're making me want to dive back into the Batverse. Oh my God. All right, Kait Scotchless, what's your book recommendation?
So the latest comics lady that I've been plowing through her back catalog of is Emily Carroll, like I mentioned. Starting with A Guest in the House, because of the reading challenge, which content warning, a vague content warning here because I don't want to spoil anything for just general violence against women.
Mm-hmm. I already talked about the Killing Joke. I think we've passed that a while back.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, but like, it's such an interesting OGN about this woman who's recently married to a widowed man who has this like tween / early teen. I don't actually remember how old she's supposed to be, but like 12 or 13-ish year old girl. And she's like trying to step into this new role as a woman, as like a middle-aged woman who's always been single, always just kind of lived her life and had her job, and she's trying to step into this kind of domestic role as a wife and a kind of surrogate mother to this grieving child, and is kind of reevaluating what it means to be, who she is and to be a female and stuff. And in this process, she's starting to learn more and more about this first wife. And like, the more she learns, the less things add up. And she starts to wonder if this woman actually died of cancer like she was told, or if something more sinister happened. And the art does this incredible job of going back and forth between black and white and color, where the color is her slipping into this kind of fantasy surreal zone, and the black and white is like reality. But the two become to blend more and more as she kind of is losing touch. It is just so perfectly executed. And it includes basically her relating to and getting to know in some kind of abstract way this dead first wife, and relating to her and sort of in a way falling in love with her, and like just she becomes this kind of she projects so much onto her, right? So I don't know, it's fascinating. Highly recommend.
What is it with the story trope of mysterious first wife that I must become obsessed with? There's Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. There's Jane Eyre with Rochester's friggin' like attic wife. Like what?
The thing is men be freaking creepy. Like first red flag, you guys. This husband is a dentist.
Why is that a flag?
There you go. That's all you needed to know.
Why is that a flag? I'm concerned now.
Why would you pick a career in face bones?
Kait, what are you talking about? We have dentist listeners. You can't. do this. Face bones.
Fun true story. One of my former roommates, her last name was Payne, and her brother became a dentist,
that's
a
terrible.
children's dentist, no less, named Dr. Payne.
No, that's a super villain origin story right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Spelled Payne,
Doesn't
but
matter.
still.
It still counts.
So I just finished that one and picked up her OGN adaptation of Laurie Halse Anderson's novel Speak, which, again, because of spoilers, just broad violence against women, content warning here. And I feel like this is the perfect kind of book for an OGN adaptation, as art plays such a pivotal role in the story. I don't know if you guys have read this novel, but like art is a really central part of the character development and overall like way this girl kind of comes into herself as this teen girl that's coping with something really serious that you don't know, right? That's like a big part of the mystery, is like what happened. Like we start the story with a new school year, and you're seeing all these former friends and former classmates that she used to be really close to, and now they're not speaking, and she's the completely ostracized and shut down, and you have no idea why. And it kind of goes from there, right? But it's another story about how the world views and treats women, including how women view and treat other women and project onto other women things that they do or don't like about themselves, right? And how they deal about it. So it really has interesting echoes of A Guest in the House. So this one is entirely in black and white.
Interesting.
But she has a beautiful art style, and I do really like that she doesn't follow the usual like hard comics panels format. It's much more just kind of broad, sketchy art with words thrown in instead of like dialogue boxes and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
So that's
I was gonna say, is it kind of like evoking a mood as opposed to doing like a very wordy narrative kind of vibe?
Yeah, the art does a lot of the work, and it tends to be much more flowy because of that, because there's not like distinct panels like you'd have in like a superhero comic so much, you know what I mean? But you might have heard of her. She did Into the Woods, that was like a series of short stories that was all in white, black, and red.
Ooh. Add to cart.
Emily
Add to
Carroll.
cart. I don't think I'm familiar, but
it's like a creepy fairy tale-y adult, not for children collection of stories. I don't know that you'd call it an anthology because it's all one artist, an author. She writes and draws her own stuff, but it is good.
Literally Googling this right now. It's just like
I really like Emily Carroll's style. It is dark. Like she does tend to go a little bit darker, but
I don't
mood.
I have yet to find one of her things that is cheerful.
Oh god. Yeah. Okay.
But she was a good artist to adapt Speak, like that. I mean, I think that the novel originally came out in the 90s. And yeah, she was a good person to bring it like into today. Like I think that it wasn't adapted until the last decade. Yeah,
very
2018.
recently. Speak is one of those books that's been on all of the try to ban from schools lists, because it involves real issues that happen to real kids. Why I can't have that? And so it's both like was heavily used in the classroom by English teachers and then heavily opposed by parents for not being all, sunshine and rainbows. And so also kudos to anyone who's willing to like step into that space knowing that it's already a hotly contested book for over a decade.
Yeah. I feel like Speak is a really good fictional representation of this pattern that I've noticed, where going back through all of these books that I've read, I realized that like there are a lot of books on my read list that are by women, and they're about women like exploring something about themselves or building relationships with the people around them, fixing relationships, or like having an internal journey, dealing with something. And I don't know if there are a lot of books by people who aren't women out there that are like this, and I just haven't read them. Like this might be confirmation bias, but there seems to be a lot of memoirs that are about like themselves, like an internal journey. And I feel like Lucy Knisley is a really good example of that. Like she's done some travelogues, but then she's also done books about like her like wedding and marriage and then like becoming a mother and things like that.
Yeah, her work is so lovely. I wonder, like there are obviously a lot of memoir comics that are done by men, but I wonder if like this is part of the whole like people in places of power have their own confirmation bias of like what kinds of stories you want to tell. So I
Yeah.
wonder if it's like easier for a female creator to be like, I've got this story about my life from my perspective versus being like, I want to draw the Transformers comic book. Like, you know. So I mean, I would like to think that we're past
Yeah.
that point, but I'm not a creator who is not a white man, so I can't really speak for that. Um I went back in time a ways for my pick. It's I was thinking about the 1940s, and the 1940s were not a great decade.
A ways back.
Ways back.
Okay.
I was thinking about the 1940s compared to the 1950s, and just in terms of the way that women were represented in media. And there was, I think, this moment in the 40s where, like, obviously, like, nowhere near equality between the sexes in terms of opportunities. Like, women couldn't have a credit card in the United States in their own name until the 1970s, for example. That's my favorite bad fun fact. But in the 40s, there were a lot of like heroines with gumption, to steal the buzzword from the holiday. But you know, 1940s Lois Lane, 1940s Wonder Woman, 1940s, like there's so many female heroes in comic books, and you know, even on the screen, who got to have like a little more attitude than even a decade later, because in the 50s then you start getting like post-war things that are like super heteronormative, whereas like during the war women were like doing jobs that normally the men would be doing, and they were, you know, wearing more pants and wearing bright makeup for morale, and just like being like getting to try out different roles. That it's like, obviously we wish that the global conflict that killed millions of people did not happen, but women had a moment where they could try something new. And I think that was reflected in some of the like mainstream superhero comics at the time, and it's something that I think was then a little lost for a few more decades. But like, I just remember so vividly when I was younger seeing one of like the Superman animated cartoons from like the late 30s, early 40s. And Lois, like the whole plot is basically Superman being like, Lois, no, and Lois being like, Lois, yes, like just like hiking up the edge of a volcano to get the story because she's a reporter, damn it, and she's going to get the scoop over her competitors. And Superman's like, but now I have to save you. It's like, yeah, I'm doing my job. Get out of my way. And I'm just like, damn, we had to wait like another how many decades for like that kind of attitude again. So I was digging back in my own archives. And of course, like with this show, we're painting in very broad strokes because again, 45 minutes to talk about ladies in comics, it's just not enough time, but we'll take what we can get. We talk about them all the time. This show is great. This show is great for ladies in comics. So the book that I found from my own personal archives that I got like over a decade ago, and it's time to revisit, is a collection of Miss Fury comic book strips from the 40s. And Miss Fury is billed in this collection as being the first female superhero. And she like is a, stop me if you've heard this before, from 30s and 40s superhero comics. She's a socialite by day, and by night she's an international woman of mystery. She's basically Batman, but she's a lady. And so
Okay.
like and her like alter ego costume is, she's like putting on a jaguar skin essentially, so she looks like Catwoman, but like decades before Catwoman was Catwoman. So my strong suspicion is that when Catwoman finally got redesigned from wearing her dress with like the thigh high slit into wearing a cat suit, that somebody had grown up reading Miss Fury comics, because this comic strip is like, she is like a prototypical like 1940s heroine. She's sassy, she's sexy, she's smart, she's like pulling a fast one on all these guys. I like opened to a random page where she was like, oh no, this dude like took away this silver dish with my fingerprints on it, but if I promise to marry him, maybe I can sneak it away from him. And I'm like, yes, girl, use your feminine wiles. Use what you've got at that time. And it's just like so nice to go back and be like, oh, there have always been these stories. It's just what is amplified, what is celebrated. Because like thinking back to the 40s, you think, okay, Wonder Woman, Lois Lane, like I said. But it's like, who's thinking about Miss Fury? The answer is Dynamite Comics, because they brought her back 15 years ago when I was getting into comic books, which is how I found out about her. But like, you know, they were doing a more like modern style comic book, whereas like 40s superhero like newspaper strips, it is definitely text heavy and plot heavy. But I'm looking at this collection and I'm like, where's my prestige television drama about her? Like, somebody get the rights to Miss Fury and make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time too in terms of women, actual women going into the comics industry, because there was a lot of that sort of thing where women were suddenly in artist roles and writer roles for like strips and other positions in publishing, that because of men going off to war. So there was some of the, just like in so many industries, some of the women entering the field outside of just being a secretary because of the shortage of dudes.
Yeah.
I read another book from the library, which is sliding into this discussion super well. It was the Incredible Nellie Bly, and this is by Luciana Camino and art by Sergio Algonzino. Nellie Bly was like, I know that name, and I knew that she wrote, but I didn't know like when or like how influential she was or anything. And she lived like wrote like 1890s to like the 1920s or something like that. I just read this. I should remember the dates.
You're fine. You're fine. Go on.
So like she really pushed into journalism when women really weren't journalists. Like there was actually a note, a couple of panels that talked about the women who were journalists were like their husbands were very influential and they were rich and they were just there like to write like recipes or something, which is also important. But like Nellie Bly wanted to do investigative journalism and like snuck into like a mental hospital and reported on the conditions there, and also traveled around the world in 72 days right after the story about Around the World in 80 Days came out. So that was a really popular thing to do, and she was the first woman to do it under the 80 days.
Nice. Go Nellie.
And the comic actually mentioned that like she was incredibly popular worldwide and kind of opened the door for stories like about, for example, Lois Lane to happen and other women to get into journalism and writing and such. So that was a really good comic to read.
I love that
for this episode.
You reminded me of my like top of my pile comic book. Last year, Fantagraphics published a I guess it's like, I think it's an adaptation of Anaïs Nin's work, Sea of Lies, and it's basically like her words, but with illustrations to accompany them. And I am super unfamiliar with Anaïs Nin's work, but I know she's like a huge influence. Like I know she had a very not standard like sex life and romance life, and I'm just like, oh, I could read a comic book about her that's beautifully illustrated as a stepping off point to see if I want to dive deeper into her work. I feel like I should know. It's like Nellie Bly. Like I feel like I should know about you. I should know more about this lady who was cool.
That does sound very familiar. Like I'm like, oh, I've read that comic creator, but I don't think that's a comic creator, is it?
No, Anaïs Nin is a writer, and then the artist is Leonie Bischoff. As I crane backwards to look at my bookcase to double check. But yeah, so that is definitely a top of my pile book. Kait Lamphere, from your stack of library books, what is next on your pile on this topic?
I am not all the way through my pile for this particular round of like research for the
that's
show.
What I'm saying.
You know?
What is next on that pile that you have?
So I have a book called Women Discoverers, Top Women in Science by Marie Monard. And this is an anthology about women in in math and science, and it begins with Marie Curie. I am that far. The first very long story was about Marie Curie and her career, and discovering new elements, radioactive elements. And I know that more of this book is going to be about like people all over the world. Some like, for example, there's an astronaut on the cover, and I don't know who that is. And I'm very excited to find out. And I'm excited about the diversity of people in this book because I haven't heard of some of them. Like that, yeah, they started with Marie Curie. I know who that is. I know that they've got is it Hedy Lamarr in there? Yep. But there are people in here that I haven't heard about. And I read another book a couple of months ago, another anthology book about women who like made history. But this one was actually called Why She Wrote, a graphic history of the lives, inspiration, and influence behind the pens of classic women writers.
Yeah.
And this was by Lauren Burke and Hannah K. Chapman with art by Kaylee Bales. And these were specifically about women writers. And that was a really insightful nonfiction work to learn more about women that I didn't know a whole lot about. And that was a really interesting comic book because they actually had like one spread of like a prose description about telling you more about their life, and then they would give you a little comic short story to like basically engage the comic readers and to like show you, kind of like literally show you what their lives were like at the time that they lived. So that was these are really good anthologies. I love these anthologies where they just tell you about people that you didn't know a lot about. These are great.
Well, you are bringing me back so hard to my childhood right now because my mom would always like get me these books out from the library, or in some rare beautiful cases I got to own them, of these like anthologies of women in history who did all these cool things, and women from all over the world, and or fictional story anthologies. Like I remember so vividly, there was this book series called Girls to the Rescue, and it was just all these little short stories about girls who like from all over the world who like saved the day in some capacity. And like I used to love that stuff, and you're making me want to be like, why did you stop reading books like this? You can read lots of short stories about ladies being cool, because you know when you're a kid and you read stories like that, you're like, oh, I could do that.
I feel like these stories, for me, I've got a whole list in the show notes. Check out our Patreon. We have all of the show notes for our shows. I've got a larger list that I'm not going to have time to talk about all of these. But I feel like these nonfiction or fiction stories about women kicking ass and doing good things and helping the people around them and also themselves, they're like really uplifting. Like it makes me feel like I can achieve the things that I want to do. But then it also makes me feel like these were women who just like pursued their passions and did the things that they were good at and like learned new stuff and did what they wanted to do. And I'm like, I'm already doing that, right? So I'm already cool.
Oh.
I'm great.
I love that. No, that is,
it's very empowering.
That is so empowering. I love that. I want some of that energy. Like I say, like, I want some of that energy when I've been going around being like, I achieved all my dreams this year and now it's time to find a new one. Like, I feel like this is such a good moment to be like, it's okay, guys, we got this.
Yeah, definitely. Women are great. Women are cool. You should read more comics about women.
I definitely think we're great.
That's what I'm going to do when we get off.
Kate Scotchless, do you have a top of your pile?
Yeah, partially read, not completed for this episode, is Faith Erin Hicks' new one, Hockey Girl Meets Drama Boy or Loves Drama Boy. What is the title of this?
Hockey Girl.
I'm sorry. Should have prepped.
Drama Boy loves Hockey Girl. Hockey Boy loves. Oh no,
guys! There is a Hockey Girl and there is a Drama Boy.
Girl, there is a Drama Boy.
It is very cute so far, and I am here for it. Also, mean teenage girls being mean teenage girls. After just watching the Mean Girls musical, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I really like that book. I feel like that did a really nice job of kind of swapping like the gender expectations, because it's a hockey player who's a girl and somebody who likes art who's a boy. But it like they do actually like dig into the characters and make well-rounded characters and like self-aware characters who want to like be close to the people around them. So it's not just like this one-dimensional, let's swap the gender roles for I don't know, popularity or something. Like, it's actually a good, well-developed story. Yeah.
Okay, I locked it down. It's Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy.
Yes.
I haven't gotten to the love point yet. I haven't gotten there. But
you're on a journey. You know the destination.
I'm ready for it. Also notable, Faith Erin Hicks is Canadian. So that adds to the hockeyness.
I love her work.
For sure.
I remember really, really loving Friends with Boys and The Adventures of Superhero Girl. She's got like, I don't know, I feel like whenever she puts out a book, I'm like, yes, continue. Please keep making the things.
I really like her stories.
Mm-hmm.
As she gets further in her career, I like her art more and more. Some of her earlier artwork I didn't care for so much.
It's interesting.
But she's definitely grown as an artist.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see that progression when you've been following a creator for a long time. I just like whipped around to look at my bookcase because I was like, you know what I want to read again, guys, that I haven't read in a while. And I found out recently is still ongoing. Monstrous, Marjorie Lou Sana Takeda.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that either.
Right. Okay. So this book started like 10 years ago now, and it is one of the most lusciously illustrated books I can like remember seeing. And so these creators are just crafting this really mythologically rich world based on like a lot of like Asian mythologies. And I just remember like reading the first volume and being so wrapped up in the intensity of the world building. And I like, while looking at some of the new comics the other day, I was like, wait, this is still, you're still making this? Like, so I want to go back and revisit that one because I remember really liking it, and it's still going. So clearly a lot of people still like it, which is great for them. So
yeah, the real fans will remember like 7 years ago when I was completely obsessed with the Vision and talked about it every single time I was on the show, the Tom King maxi series.
Mm-hmm.
And it lost to Monstrous at the Eisners that year. And I was so salty. I never read Monstrous.
You have to read Monstrous.
But
this
I really
is your
should.
homework.
I know, I do.
You have to get over your Vision anger and read Monstrous.
I also just really, really need to own a hardcover omnibus of the Vision. That makes me think about that. I bet it's so much cheaper now because, you know, when it came out, of course, it was like $50 or $100 or something stupid because DC, you know, like
I don't know. What if it's sold out?
Sorry.
I had to overpay for my like rounding out my collection of The Wicked and the Divine because that was sold out.
Yeah,
FOMO.
that could be it too.
FOMO. You gotta just buy the books to support the creators you love.
No, Wickdiv did me dirty in that I started with the trade paperbacks and then they came out with the pretty hardcovers, now I have FOMO of the hardcovers.
Yep. Yeah,
but I already own all the paperbacks.
Struggle.
So what are
just
you
be like
do?
Tia and own it like 6 different versions.
I was gonna say what you're gonna do is just buy multiple copies of the same comic, like every comic fan, and then wonder why you have no money.
Oh, we've been talking a lot about non-superhero genre comics, Kait Lanfear's recommendation notwithstanding. I kind of want to close us out by saying what are your top 3 lady superheroes? Doesn't have to be created by a woman, but just like off the top of your head. I can start if you want.
Batwoman.
That one. I'm going to start. Batwoman, yes. Huntress, also from the Bat family for me. And Supergirl, I've always loved Supergirl, even though they tend to write her very angry, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But also she and I share the same name, so go Karas.
I had never loved Supergirl until reading that recent one that just came out, Supergirl
Woman of Tomorrow.
Something Tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
There you go. That one was incredible.
Yeah, read that one. All right. Kait Lanfear, go.
I'm definitely becoming an Oracle fan.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to read more about her. I feel like there's a special place in my heart for Rogue, mostly because of that first X-Men movie. And I have not read a lot of comics about Rogue. So if I'm putting myself like supporting something bad, my apologies.
No, she's great.
But a special place in my heart. So
over on the X.
I just started watching. I just started watching that Becoming Anna or whatever it was, the miniseries on the Anna Sorkovina or something like that document, and it has the actress that plays Rogue as like the reporter.
Oh.
It is so weird seeing her in something non-superhero. Yeah.
All right. I also want to do a shout out to Jubilee and to Storm on the X-Men, and also in the Marvel Universe, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Yes.
Yep.
Ooh, good pick.
I realized I asked you for 3 and then I said 3 for everybody, but we are at time. I have loved this conversation, and we continue this conversation every time that we're on the show. And you know, if you're not a longtime listener, I will tell you that the boys contribute to this as well. This is a great show all around for everyone talking about creators from all different kinds of backgrounds. I want to give a special shout out to one of our boys, Danny, who was our proof listener on this episode and had a hilarious both hands up reaction when Kait Scotchless said men were trash earlier. So thank you, Danny, for helping us with this. Thanks to all of our listeners. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you.